in the 1700s and they tried to do it with telescopes, and they weren't able to achieve that. And we didn't even discover Pluto until 1930. Okay, what you see in the Nibiru Orbital, the Anunnaki, we're talking about all the planets and their relationships, 8,000 years ago. So they're way ahead of us. That being said, as I looked into this, I tried several attempts to corroborate what we know from a Western mind, kind of a scientific mindset, as to where the thing really is. Okay, so we had some milestones to use, and the most significant one for me came from both the biblical Exodus, which I didn't see as real tangible, but from the IRAS scope that was taken in the late 1970s and the 80s. So we had Voyager 1, Voyager 2, Pioneer 10, and 11. Okay? And each of those were placed at a location around our solar system to detect something coming in, something going out, and then something even at the perihelion, which means the closest point as it crosses near the sun. Now, if you had two pieces of information from NASA, which they won't give you, how far out it is at aphelion, the farthest location from the sun, and also what its geometry was, in particular its density and its mass. Okay, because that determines the velocity of this rock that gets slingshot around the sun. So imagine a very large elliptical orbit that takes 1,800 years to come in and 1,800 years to go out. Okay, so we're talking more than 50 billion miles away from the sun. Okay, Pluto sits at about 3.6 billion miles from the sun. Okay, so we're talking about 45, 47 billion miles farther than Pluto. The problem is, Nibiru, according to Nibiru, had more than one satellite, sun. There was a constellation of them. There wasn't just one body that they lived on. Okay? So it's been called a brown dwarf, it's been called a failed star, all these other labels. Okay? The reality is, it's very large. In order for something to be that large, it had to be larger than Jupiter and Uranus in order to tilt the orbits. Now you think about how big something coming by, having a gravitational magnetic effect with another planet would cause it to tilt and stay that way, not go back. Okay? It's never gone back. So that's why this has been a focal point for people like Harrington and all the researchers that go all the way back into the 1700s. So in my Nibiru Orbital report, I gave you a link to all the newspaper articles, and there have been hundreds and hundreds since the 50s. This is not new. So all of a sudden you go, well, these guys were all focused on it way back then. Where is it now? And that's what everybody wants to know. So, and a lot of it has to do with the motivation of fear, because they don't want to die. So facing the fear of death by some incoming destroyer planet, and every ancient document describes it as very destructive. Okay? From the Bible calling it wormwood, and all the seals that are broken that coincide with what happened in the Exodus in Egypt. The plagues, possibly lack of oxygen, red iron oxide coming from the dust trail that pollutes all the water and turns it red, and all the other things. Okay? So it really comes down to where is the Earth relative to the sun when this large planetary complex comes around perihelion and then starts its way back out. So that really is the basis of why I did this report, because I had read old information, and everybody had an opinion, and unless you had the instruments to truly see it, as far as I was concerned, it was speculation. And so I kind of like, well, if it comes, it comes, and I kind of put it off in my mind. I wrote my first book and discussed it then, but never really went into significant detail of where is it right now, because I thought it was speculation. So I started studying Harrington's work a little bit closer, and I read all his reports, his personal scientific reports that he wrote, and the guy that came after him named Tom Van Flanders, who's no longer alive either. Okay, as I showed you in the video, he met with Dr. Chichen in August 1990 and discussed their two orbital charts, comparing and contrasting them with where they thought the planet was at the time, and that was very, very telling. I'm surprised that was allowed to stay on YouTube. So it was done a long time ago. The video quality is kind of crappy. There is a good quality one on my YouTube site that hopefully will stay up. Every time I go in there and check my playlist here recently, this video has been deleted, and they don't even tell you which one it is. Well, there's no one been deleted from your playlist. So it's kind of a crazy information control game that's going on. Okay, so I tried several attempts at pinning down where this planet was. Because if Harrington thought that they saw it with the IRS scope in 1981, there was two pieces of information that came out of that hardcore data from a infrared astronomical scope that's super cool in order to detect even a brown dwarf that cannot be detected in outer space. Okay, we're talking almost silver degree Kelvin, more minus 400 degrees C. Okay, very cold. So unless you know a friend who's got a digital camera that was that good, or a telescope way back then, I just got the information. And that was partly my fault. I know from the scientific standpoint that, especially with NASA, that if they don't want you to know something, you're not going to know it. Okay? And unless you had direct access to their data, everything was speculation. So, with that said, I decided to take James's challenge and go look at the new data because it was a hot topic again, and try to make sense of it for people. And I had no idea what I was stepping into, actually. It got very, very heated. So, what did Harrington tell us in 1990? He told us that from the IRS scope data, and by the way, there was another gentleman involved named Neubauer, which I think was a misinformation host. They did not agree about how far the Guru was in 1990, nor did they agree whether it was stationary or incoming. But they did a blink test at that time, meaning they took a picture of it, waited a certain period of time, turns out 6 months was the time, and then took another one. Well, if you know distance equals rate times time, you can take rate equals distance divided by time, because we know the time, according to the Sumerians, told us it was 1,800 years inbound, 1,800 years outbound. So if you knew what it was at the furthest distance divided by that 1,800, you could find out what the rate was, the average rate of this planet traveling in. And the problem is it travels like a comet, not like a normal planet in close orbit around our sun. So and comets do something very unusual in their long elliptical orbits. When they're at the far outbound point away from the sun, they travel much slower. But when they get in close and start experiencing the magnetic and gravitational effects from the sun and interact with other planets, they may deviate course and they speed up and slow down, but especially when they get close to the sun. And we do this in space today. We use planets in their gravitational field to stay in close orbit to them, and use that gravitational thrust to slingshot rockets or craft off of them. Well, a comet that's coming in will do exactly the same thing. So the problem is, in pinning down exactly where this big rock is how big is it geometrically? What's the mass, so you know what the gravitational effect is? And there's math that you can do this with. So how fast is it going to come in and go out? And that's been very close to guard, that information. Okay. If I had those two pieces of information, I could actually do ephemeral calculation and tell you exactly what it is. Okay. But it's very, like I said, it's very close to guard. So what do we know? We know that Harrington and Neubauer said they found it and reported it in the newspapers in 1981. But they found it actually earlier than that, but it wasn't released in the papers until then. So this planet X, or 10th planet, was what Chichen called it, because that's what the Anunnaki had depicted it as, this extra planet on VA243. Does everybody know what VA243 is? This was the famous cylinder seal that Michael Heisner decided to smear Chichen over, basically discredit everything he did based on his, contrarian viewpoint of what this meant on that seal. Okay, so in 1990, the best information we had from my report was Neubauer said it was 50 billion miles away from the sun. Okay. Chichen, Dr. Harrington said no, we believe it's 5 billion miles outside of Pluto. So they're off by a scale of 10. Neubauer said it's not moving and dumped all kinds of disinformation that it's not coming in, so and he did this in the newspaper article. So I was like, really? Well, why would you have taken a blink method test here and in 6 months and not shared that data? It never got shared. Because if humans had that data, they could go, distance equals rate times time, we can figure it out ourselves. But they didn't share that. But Harrington had it. Okay? So in that interview, he did something kind of interesting that I think he did on purpose. And a lot of people probably didn't catch it. And I'll discuss that in a minute. It had to do with the scale of the chart that he showed. Remember, he said it was only 5 billion miles outside of Pluto, which was 3.67 billion miles. So now we're 8.7 billion miles outside of Pluto in 1990. You with me? That's not a big distance. And if you're 50 billion miles away, you're still in our solar system, according to several. Okay, so it's not a long distance. So what I did is I took those numbers from the IRAS report. I computed an average velocity of rock moving toward us, if Carrington was correct, and then took into account some of the slingshot rates that we know comets experience when they get close orbit and get slingshot around. So in general, that rate varies. It could go from anywhere from 2, 3, 5 times the average velocity up to even 20 times as fast. Okay? So if you knew what that scalar was and how fast it got slingshot around the sun, then you could have a better chance of pinning down where it is. Okay? Is everybody with me so far? Am I being too scientific?
No.
Okay. I know it'd be easier with slides. It's all in the report, okay, all the data. Okay, so at that point I'm like, well, let's go back to what the Sumerians gave us on some of their seals. Okay. So on VA 243 it shows a central sun with 10 planets. Okay. And no one ever thought to ask, well, which is which? Are they real? You know, is this the Earth they're depicting? So what I did was I used some research that somebody else had looked at to try to look at the correlation between those circuits, those spherical two-dimensional dots on that VA 243 that were surrounding the sun, and made the assumption, like Sitchin did, that they represented our solar system. Okay. I numbered them 1 through 12, from the smallest to the largest, measured the pixel size, blew it up, measured the pixel size of each one, put it in a table, and then took our known planetary sizes, okay, except for Nibiru, that was the guess. But we had the data from some other sources, and you can see that in the table. And then essentially compared the pixel size of these cylinder seal etched objects were fair. Everything we know about cylinder seal so far, they're extremely precise. These are not haphazard things. And the technology that's used to make them is still not understood today, how they did it. It's amazing. Reverse etching on a piece of crystal that you need diamond to do. And it's not imprinted, it's engrossed, so you get the opposite effect. You know what I'm saying? So you've got this image standing up out of here, so you have to be able to see it three-dimensionally in reverse to make this work. And with precision, it's like, I can't even imagine how they did it. Okay, so starting there, comparing the pixel size of what we have on VA 243 with our known planets and their diameters in kilometers, if you just take that data and compare it, it comes out about 89% correlated. It's pretty good. It's enough to make you go a little deeper and go, okay, how come it's not 100% correlated? Right? So it's not convincing enough. But you have a geometrical mapping problem when you're trying to take a bunch of planets that are various sizes, the sun being the largest and Pluto being the smallest. How do you represent that in a 2D image so that everybody shows up and one's not just a little tiny dot, this one's that big? Understand what I'm saying? It's hard to do. And we do this today in presenting the solar system. We use mapping algorithms and say, well, this is the scalar to go from here to here. So what we were looking for was a mathematic way to go from the pixels of the VA 243 sizes of those planets to the actual measured diameters of our planets today to see if what Sitchin said was true. And this was very controversial. Okay? So I decided to do this on behalf of Sitchin, actually, and because Michael Heisman really upsets me to dishonor a dead person the way he's done. Yeah. Okay. And I'm sure I'll get it too, but while I'm alive, I'm going to try to protect the heroes, whether they were absolutely right or not. The ones that put it out there for humanity, they deserve to be honored. Anyway, one of the secrets is how do you do a large set of data down to something that's, well, it turns out you can use logarithmic scales to do that. Okay? So instead of a linear scale, this diameter, if you took a logarithmic scale, you can create a relationship that then can have a mathematical transform to go back and forth. Okay? So, what number system should you use to do this? Base 10 like we use, or this number system the Sumerians were using? Sexagesimal. I decided to use sexagesimal logarithms to compare these two data sets. And it turns out when I did that, using log base 66, log base 6, for the smaller data, I had a 99.5% correlation between them. And James was absolutely convinced after that that was it. Okay? This cylinder seal truly represents a 10th planet in our solar system that they came from. Trying to type.
So what is the mass or the size of Nibiru with this 99% correlation?
I believe it came out to, I didn't bring the table in front of me, that's why I sent it all out to you. It looked like it was 17.8 times bigger than the diameter of the Earth. And it was only about 3 times bigger than Jupiter. And of course the Sun is the largest one, which is about 1 million kilometers. It's the largest one. So it was around 225,000 kilometers in diameter. It was very large.
So wouldn't the gravity on a body like that crush a human being?
That's a good question. What would a body that size coming in some proximity with the Earth, okay? Now, imagine the Earth is on the opposite side of where it comes, and it doesn't see the radiation or the disturbances or the coronal mass ejections or whatever interaction it has with the Sun when it comes into close perihelion. This is possible as well. So it really depends on where the Earth is relative to the
when it comes around.
So imagine you have the Sun here and you have the Milky Way galaxy here that has a 14 trillion mile or diameter black hole in it that's creating a gravity plane that's so strong. And when we talk about the galactic center, that's what the ball going through the ball court meant, is that radiation belt in that spiraling Milky Way galaxy is very different than outside. And our Earth and our whole solar system kind of sinusoidally migrates up and down through it. 13,000 years, every 13,000 years it passes through it. So that's where you get the great years, 25,920 years, is this wobble that's been caused in our Earth. We don't know if it came from the way the Milky Way galaxy is spinning the planet, but a lot of them are undulating up and down. So it looks like the whole Milky Way galaxy is going like this, and then the planets are migrating around as they're being dragged around this big circle. Galactic time, if you will. So that was the real kicker for me to get this report started, was it looked like VA243 was an accurate depiction of not only the planet size, but where they were in relation to each other. And then I think there's more information encoded around that seal that needs to be decoded as well. Like, you saw that some Anunnaki being sitting there was providing a plow to mankind. So let's go. So there's a lot more data there. Were these in a particular zodiacal house at which time this happened? So these planets were not only in the right orbit, but were they in a zodiacal house at that time that could be figured out as well. So there's lots more investigation to be done in that seal. Okay, so from there, I moved on. I tried to correlate the time frame of the Sumerian kings and the flood they described with what we know to be as Noah's flood. Okay, so a lot of people believe Noah's flood was correlated with the Nibiru because of some of the Sumerian writings. And we know Noah's flood based on evidence that I have. Remember, there were multiple floods, 4 major ones and multiple minor ones. Looks like it happened at the end of the last ice age. Well, that was 10,000 BC, or about 12,000 years ago. Okay? And a lot of scientists agree that that was Noah's flood. It also coincides with the evidence we found in the Fertile Crescent, genetic evidence for seed grains and crops that the Anunnaki said they sent back down to replenish the earth so we have some food. Okay? Actually, it happened a full SAR after they landed there, which is 3,600 years. And Dumuzi himself was the one held back to bring it back to the earth and these kids. Interesting. Okay, so let's go on to what I call Neubauer's rate. So I tried to be conservative, took this 50 billion miles from the sun that Neubauer said that the IRASCO had reported this planet being, and computed what I call the Neubauer rate, which is simply rate equals distance divided by time, or distance equals rate times time, you can divide it. So So I wanted to know the rate, the average rate this thing was moving, so that I could determine when's it going to be here. So if we knew that and knew the location, you'd say, well, it's coming. But as soon as it gets close in proximity to our inner planets, Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, and then Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, those are the kind of the outer big planets. When you got in close between Mars and Jupiter, where the hammered bracelet is our asteroid belt, at that point, it looks like it would start increasing your velocity by quite a lot. So what is that slingshot rate, that scalar rate that you get multiplied by the average velocity to figure out where this planet is? So using the data from Harrington, he did something very important after that video was Sitchin in 1990. In 1991, he went to Blackbirch, New Zealand, where they had an observatory set up. Actually, he was building the observatory at the time. He took his own personal 8-inch scope to go there so that he could corroborate personally a blink rate, because he'd been shut down by the people that were, I think, holding the data, including Neugebauer. Okay. So he was going to go get it himself, and then disclose this at a conference that he had set up back in the United States when he returned. Well, between him going there, taking his 8-inch scope, gathering some data, and coming back, he died of fast-acting cancer that he didn't have before he left. So we're like, okay, what's going on here? So he was getting too close to the truth, and in my opinion, they didn't want it disclosed. Now let's think about this. Why wouldn't NASA want you to know about something like this?
It's catastrophic.
How many people would stay working at their jobs? They'd start doing their bucket list. No way. If I'm going to die, or I don't know, I want access to your underground bunker, it would cause absolute chaos. And it may still. I mean, it's starting to happen right now. There are amateur astronomers all over the world that have gotten this data and are starting to release it. Even ones with infrared scopes. So as it gets closer in between Mars and Jupiter, all of a sudden, amateur astronomers are going to be able to start seeing it. And it's going to start leaking out. Well, that's happening right now. All over the world. If you go on YouTube and look up Nibiru, it's just crazy how much stuff's happening right now. Has anybody been looking at it?
Well, there's somebody that has something that they see it through the sun or something.
Yeah.
It's like a little thought off of it.
Well, so let's talk about that. So, in 1991, if he was in New Zealand at Blackbirch Observatory, looking into the south, okay, because they both believed, if you look at Harrington's chart, they believed it was coming up through the south in a very inclined orbit, not on the plane of our planet, so our planets are going around. Well, this one's coming in at a different angle, and it comes in the opposite direction the way our planets spin. Okay, well, that's already a problem, because that means it could cross the path of one of these planets as it's coming back out, right? Because they could collide. So that's a big issue. That's one of the reasons they call it the planet of crossing. Planet of crossing.
Crossing, okay.
Okay, so I believe that in 1991, it was already coming in close enough that it could be seen with an 8-inch scope. You realize how small an 8-inch scope is? I used to have one. You can get a Schmidt-Cash scope about this big that's using a reflective focal length, and it's easier to carry around when it's this big. Well, I think that's what he was using. Well, I had one of those for years, and I know the limitations of one. You can see the moon really well, but seeing really distant objects is very difficult, especially if you're not up a high mountain. You've got the terrestrial atmosphere to deal with, the scintillation from lights and dust in the air, all the other things. That's why they go to high observatories to get past that to see these things. And New Zealand had a place like that. That's why he went there. He believed that was one of the few places that he would be able to see it until it went into what you call perihelion with the sun. So depending on how fast the planet and its complex were moving, once it passed the solar ecliptic on the inbound, it would go behind our sun and we wouldn't be able to see it for almost a year and a half, depending on the slingshot rate, okay? So, that being said, I believe from 1991, when he went and got this data, was about to share it until about 2014, the planet was actually about to cross over our solar ecliptic and go into perihelion with the sun. And I truly believe that happened in 2014 based on the numbers that I have in my report. So add about a year and a little bit for it to come out the other side of the sun. Now, if it comes out of perihelion with the sun, it's going to be seen from the northern hemisphere, not from the south anymore. Now it's on the other side, right? So I started looking at the data going, well, why did the Catholic Church spend all this money on a Lucifer scope and set it up in Arizona in the northern hemisphere? Because they were looking for something coming out of perihelion, and that was Nibiru. So I think it's very close, is what I'm telling you. The numbers show that if we conservatively take Neubauer's velocity rate, in the first instance, using Pluto as the outer boundary, 3.67 billion miles, you can even add 5 billion to that, which I did in my table. Say, okay, let's say Harrington was right in 1990, about how far it was from Pluto. That's a total of 8.7 billion miles from our sun. So you use this rate and a couple of these scalars, where would it be? Right? So that's what I did. And actually, this is what woke me up to realize that it's close. I realized in the first instance that I could use a velocity scalar only a 4. We could go all the way up to 20, probably, based on the density and the mass and geometry of this planet. I only had to get to 4, and it landed us right in this year. Okay? So I was like, ooh, this could be real. And then I used Neubauer's rate, along with the larger distance that he gave us, and computed that, and that scalar only came out to 7. So in either case, it's possible, whether either one of them was right, depending on the velocity scalar, it could be here in perihelion right now. And that's what I did the radio show on. And actually spooked myself. A couple other things came out. In the Colburn Bible, it talks significantly about Nibiru and when it comes by and what it does. It's very morbid to read about the destruction that it causes, so I didn't go into it deeply, but I did put it in the report for you. Okay. So, what are we in for? Why are the governments building underground cities all over the place? Maglev trains connected. I mean, they plan to live in there for a while. It's hard to know. So all of those of us who don't have a ticket, that are floundering around what to do, it brings up really serious questions. Should we be making changes in our life? We just ignore it and pretend like it's not there and let it, whatever happens, happens. It's all over the board. If you've seen the movie Melancholia, has anybody seen that? Have you seen it? It's actually a very disturbing movie where it portrays these various people in various places and their understanding of what's happening, responding to a known event where they're all going to be destroyed. One of them goes and does, kills himself because he doesn't want to face it. Another one decides to be brave and sit out in a teepee while it happens. It's just all over the board. Well, this is indicative of where we are right now. Because if you know this to be the case, and if you knew, so for instance, if you knew December 10th, just pick a date, whatever it is, that the entire surface of the planet was going to be probably flooded anywhere within 100 miles of the coast, and shortly thereafter, that the iron oxide and the hydrogen cyanide that's in the tail of this thing would kill every living thing on the surface of the Earth because there will be no more oxygen. And the debris trail in this thing is millions of miles long, with rocks of average size of 75 pounds. Well, imagine a rock falling 75 pounds, what impact it can do once it catches fire coming through our terrestrial atmosphere. Okay? And I'm not talking just a couple, I'm talking raining those things. Well, this is what happened with Revelations, right? So, imagine you knew that was going to be occurring, and you truly believed it. It's like the doctor telling you got cancer, you got 6 months, or so much time to live. What do you do? What do most people do? Exactly. So this is what comes up. People go, well, I've always wanted to go to this amusement park, and I always wanted to drive a 12-cylinder car, and I want to skydive. They do their bucket list, right? They do everything that they thought they ever wanted to do, so they don't miss out on anything. So that's where we are right now. Because as far as I'm concerned, in my report, I didn't pick a date because I didn't have those scalars, I didn't have the math, and I think it'd be crazy to do that. But based on my numbers that are believable to me, using only a scalar of 4 up to 7, and I said we could go all the way to 20, it's very conservative what I did. I truly believe that Nibiru and its complex are coming close to perihelion with our sun, if not ready to come out. So we could be as close as only 6 months to a year before that happens. So I picked from the middle of July to the end of 2016, based on my numbers, it looks like that's the closest window I can get to without having more data. But that's enough for me. That was enough for me to say living near the coast is probably not a good idea. But beyond that, am I going to go dig a hole and try to survive for a year and come out and live in a Mad Max world? That's why I brought you all here to talk about this, because it brings up really scary stuff and facing your own death. And that kind of also goes coincident with my second lecture is what we really are as energy and matter beings. Is this really important in our evolution of our consciousness?
So Gerald, I have to tell you this because, we live in Newport. You know where that's at. She's been there before. And so we are always told about the Cascadia subduction zone, It's going to take out everything from Seattle all the way to
Exactly right now, too.
if not, more. So I've lived in Newport. We lived in Newport for about 25 years. And literally, I would say in this last year, it has just been ramping up about, it's ready to go. And actually, if everybody's read that thing that lady wrote in the article, the New Yorker, the big one's coming. I mean, she literally said, go to the Oregon coast and, visit. You better not be spending the night there.
Well,
and that just scared the shit out of everybody. So, I mean, it is really elevated
I
in
know.
Oregon and Washington
it's
and
all
parts
over
of
the world. By the way,
California.
insiders with the Department of Defense who are working on, that are members of continuity of government, several other people have been told that they need to start implementing their evacuation plans in this last month. So I think it is getting close. A lot of people are highly speculative about this particular month, that there were going to be things happening from the 23rd to the 28th that could be very devastating.
Yeah.
I'm not signing up for that. I'm going to live my life without fear. But at the same time, pragmatically, there probably are going to be very devastating things happening if this planet comes anywhere close to our solar system. Like I said, I mean, it could be as close as 20 million miles away from the Earth. That's between here and the moon.
So let me just ask
it's
you
very
this question. So it comes around, and is it going to have such a gravitational impact that it will affect our plates?
Well, if you read Charles Hapgood's book from the 1950s, where the preface was written by Einstein himself, they both agreed that there was something that came around periodically that caused a sudden plate tectonic shift, so much so that Greenland used to have, mammoths that were eating tropical food and it's frozen in the sun. So that could only happen if you have a massive. Well, is it possible? We talked about a gyroscope spinning, right? And you just come in and give it a little wobble. Well, if you do that, it causes serious effects. So imagine the core of our Earth, which is molten and a lot of heavy metals, and we have a significant magnetic field around us so that you can use a compass and navigate right. Well, if another body comes in and also has a shared magnetic field, well, poles of magnets oftentimes are repulsive or attractive depending on which one's which, right? Maybe why we get pole shifts. So if it came through and it was within a distance of gravitation, suppose we're on this inclined plane, 23.5 degrees for the Earth, and some large body came around behind the sun and then came back out close enough to us. Well, first of all, there's interaction with the sun that is complex that can be studied. But if the North and South Pole were in opposition and it was repulsive, it could cause it to tilt away. Or even worst case, if they were attracted to each other, the South Pole of this one, the North Pole of this one, it could pull it along with it until they got far enough away and it's going to come back. So the question is, how quickly would it sling back to its own original axis? If it takes a real slow time, you won't get a displacement of fluids like our oceans sitting in the basins. But if it happens too quickly, then all that fluid in the ocean basins are going to be displaced and probably cover all the land, or a good portion of it. So when I talk about this being a watery planet prone to floods, I believe that's why. Does that make sense to everybody?
And then you got the other, what's the effect on the other planets? Because they're shifting out more.
Yeah, well, actually, the good indication of what that might be is when you go back and read the New Age now and realize the things they were doing to make their passage through the inner solar system safe and what they had to do to mask the radiance of this and blow that piece up. It would be a scary thing to come in to close perihelion with our sun. Knowing the planets are going the opposite direction, you would need some serious science to keep yourself from being destroyed. And I'm sure sure that's, part of the reason they ended up finding out about the Earth and probably doing spectroscopic studies of all kinds of places to get minerals and stuff to protect our atmosphere. Got to get rid of these sets of asteroids in the asteroid belt because otherwise we'll collide with them. So, yeah, it's a serious issue.
And we want to keep this planet because that's where we're going to go.
Well, I don't know. This seems to be I think they have several other planets there.
Yeah.
Whether they're in this solar system or elsewhere.
Yeah.
This one seems to be quite interesting in terms of being a slave planet and a place for evolving consciousness. We are in a reality that is constrained until we're ready to go beyond that, I believe. And I talk a lot about that in my second book. Kind of getting off the orbital stats I did before, but the bottom line is, I would keep my eyes open and just think about what pragmatically you would need to do if you have this strong survivor instinct. You're going to be buying stuff off Alex Jones show, getting a gun and living underground. And I'm not sure that's the right response. So I probably can't leave you with any solutions, but I can at least leave you to think about, okay, this is real, and I have to decide whether I'm going to do my bucket list, and the bucket list is to focus on the external material world, which we know is an illusion. All material is transit, even this. So what should we be focusing on? And that's why I want to bring it together, because for me, I think getting your energy to the highest place where you can have the highest consciousness to, which we know your soul is eternal. Hopefully everybody knows that, right? Your energy can either be created or destroyed, it only changes state. And this is a fundamental of physics, we know this. So, at that point, it seems to me that using my equation 5a would make the most sense to try to optimize your energy to get as far along as you can, because you're here to graduate from this Earth prison simulator. Okay, so
Exactly right.
So I can't prevent anybody from doing their bucket list, and nor should you do stuff that you want to experience as part of your evolutionary path. But I want you to think about balancing it with ideas of things that you can do to heighten your own energy. Okay? And Kristen and I have been focused on that for many years. That's been our focus. And I was an electrical engineer. I've always been interested in energy matter. Okay, so I'm probably a little bit of an anomaly from that standpoint. But most things we do, whether it's what we eat or how we sit or how we sleep or anything, we're always thinking about how can we get our energy to the highest state that we can achieve. We still like to have fun and sneak a Snickers. We're not perfect.
That's so good to hear.
Okay. So I'm going to kind of stop there and open it up for questions if anybody wants to. Go ahead.
Well, this one.
Sorry. So what's the theory? Are the Anunnaki still alive on Nibiru? Are they extinct? Is there still transit back and forth?
Well, my theory, if you read my books.
I haven't read your books,
Okay.
but I was going to buy one.
Go
I
ahead.
was here.
I know. Actually, it's pretty heavy to carry it play, so.
That's all right.
People from Amazon, those ships to you 2 days. And actually, you get it from a website, we still have signs for it.
All right.
What's the theory? Well, when you start looking around at signs and symbols and the way the world has been run, and each zodiac has, things were changing. My premise was, and according to their writings, about 500 BCE, apparently they were given the opportunity through a message from one of their emissaries from the Nibiru that, look, we've got some scientific evidence to indicate that being on a planet that goes real fast around the sun versus yours that goes really slow is causing rapid aging. And so Animal, when he found this out from this emissary that told him this, he was very upset. Animal additionally told this lead advanced team that came here, we're talking about the early ones, Enki, and Herzog, Enlil, and all the other cadre that were the advanced team that had been here a long time. They'd been experiencing this exposure to a Earth that was rapidly going around the sun. So all of a sudden you're asking yourselves, well, what does that have to do with aging? You mean planets that are closer to the sun, you'd age faster than if you were out here during the. Well, this brings up the whole concept of the quantum theory with Einstein about relativity in time. Okay, so all of a sudden, they made it real for Nick Herzog, who said, wait, Galzu, the emissary, we went to school together, and he told her, look, you look like you've aged a lot. Well, I think that triggered her as the medical officer to do something about their existence here on this planet and how long and to try to counter aging. And in addition to that, they received one more very devastating piece of information. That was, you can't come back to where we were. Maybe they needed a decompression time to slowly migrate back, but because of the gravitational effects, they were told, you can't come back or you will die on this planet. So they were enslaved and trapped here because they've been here so long. According to the record, Henry was furious about this. So at that point, we believe that Ned Hartsock had discovered issues about the telomeres that could be modified so that there wasn't a decay going on in their bodies, which we share their genetics with. And I think they found a couple of solutions to that. One was taking the hormones from the female flow. That's where the chalice and the flower came from. They're talking about particular hormones that they were using to activate the pineal gland that seemed to have an effect on longevity and consciousness. And so they had to cut a double whammy. So they were looking to keep their telomeres from decaying, probably due to one of the frequencies of radiation that's coming from the sun. It has an effect on DNA. We know that now. The other one was to use the process that Nishida came up with, the first alchemist, using gold in a monatomic state that also had this effect, but was easier to obtain. So I think that's one of the reasons why gold ended up as our currency basis, as well as being this radiation shield that doesn't decay. So gold has got very special properties in that sense that it's used a lot in space applications now because it doesn't erode, it doesn't decay. It doesn't tarnish like silver. So, did I answer your question?
What are you going to do?
So I believe they're here, and they never left. And they've always been the authority between every kingdom and every authority that's been running this world. Never left. Yeah. All the high finance bankers and stuff, they're their puppets. Okay, but at the top of that pyramid is the Anunnaki remnants that are in charge.
What plan? You supposed to have a plan, or you're just going to see what happens?
We're going to go live on your boat.
Eat nuts?
We're gonna go on your boat.
What's our plan? Our plan is to continue sharing this information and doing the mission that we're given through our inspiration, which is not to live in fear, but to be pragmatic. You know, to be right on the coast if you know your plan's going to get wobbled in the next year. Take a vacation if you start to see that the volcanoes are all going off simultaneously and all the things that are happening. It's probably a good idea to be away from the coast. Is that going to stop you from breathing hydrogen cyanide, being hit by falling, burning rocks, all the other things? No. So there is no safe place. There's safer places, in my opinion. So, as far as we're concerned, we're going to keep ourselves in a situation that prolong the time that we can continue doing our avatar mission on this planet. And that's about the best we can do. And the reality is, even if I was offered a safe harbor, and we went down this place in my report as well. Imagine you were offered a ticket to go into this underground facility and save yourself, but he wasn't. Would you go? And that you can extend that to all of humanity as well. Why would you sacrifice your fellow beings to save yourself? I mean, why are you so important? So this brings up a very difficult question. And then, even so, we were talking about, imagine you saw a flood coming into an area and you knew about it and had just enough time to save yourself, get up on a high precipice, but you were sitting there watching your family drown. How would that make you feel?
Horrible.
Well, there's the reverse of that too.
Yeah.
If you take the ticket underneath, you're basically enslaved.
That's
You're
right.
entombed.
That's right.
I mean, if I had to sit there and make a choice, I'd I'd rather die going out, see
Well,
the
when you
sun,
realize that
breathe fresh air than being encased like that.
well, the idea of being able to take your energy from your spirit and reanimate it into another body, Thoth tells us in the next book that you can do this in all 9 dimensions. Okay? So we have access to that. That's why, I don't know, I probably should have brought some of that into the first lecture, but it's very important who the creator of all is, what kind of circumstance we're living in, what the end goal is for us in this reality. And I believe the best we can do is achieve the highest energy state that we have been designed to achieve, if you look at it mathematically. And that's what I did with my equation 5a. So I believe it's quite accurate. I haven't been refuted yet, so it's been out for a couple of years, but I was probably the first one to publish something like that.
Well, I have other people in following your course, Gerald. I mean, I know that Richard Allen Miller, Matt Stein, I mean, they're all kind of on this merry-go-round.
Well, I know, when I first met Richard, and we were talking, they were actually quite spun up and very afraid, actually.
Yeah.
And they were making active plans and spending a lot of money to go do these lifeboat things all over the place.
Mhm.
And I think that's probably where I lost a little traction with Richard is I refused to operate out of fear, and I told him, I'm going to be focusing on ascension and heightening my energy. And he goes, well, I don't know about any of that stuff.
Well, he is reading your book, and
Yeah.
he is really enthralled with you.
I know this, because I hit him right between the eyes with what I wrote, and I could tell.
Yeah.
So,
he's
but
enthralled.
it is the question. So, and it's true for each of us. It's decide how you're going to respond to. If you were told you're going to have cancer, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
And you've got this much to lose.
Yes, well, that's what he's saying, I mean, this is currently world being pushed up into this, like it or not.
Well, I agree. That according to thought, you don't go on to the next dimension with this body. You've got to listen. So, is it possible that this whole event has been orchestrated for us to ascend? It's very possible.
Can you talk about Inky's anonymous message and what you think about it, and does it give you any hope?
Yeah, I normally would never take an anonymous message and share it. That was very unusual of me to do that. One of my fans actually found that message on Truth Frequency Radio right after it was posted. Has everybody seen what I'm talking about? Okay, I actually put it on my website, and there's an audio version of it that I did with one of those text-to-speech generators.
Okay.
It's very
Oh,
good.
I think I do remember that.
Well, so what specific part of that did you talk about?
About the work they're doing in the North and South Pole.
Okay. Okay, this is the wild card that nobody really talks about. If Enki, Poseidon, the dweller of Atlantis, is truly still here, in this anonymous message, he said some things that only a very studied insider would have the perspective to make something like this up if it was a hoax. So when I saw this, and I listened to it once, twice, by the time I listened to it 10 times, I kept hearing new things. I was like, wow, I don't think this is a hoax. It touched my spirit in a way that I realized, as an inventor, I know that I know. I felt that, and I didn't feel like I was being deceived. And usually I'll have some corroborating data once that happens to go, well, we have quite a bit of corroborating data based on what that message said. One of which was that there's been geoengineering going on this planet since the 90s with chem spraying, and he explained in his report that this was to block some of the radiation from Nibiru's encroachment as it was coming in. And that program got overtaken by his son Marduk, or in a negative way, such that they were adding components to that shield that were designed to dumb down humans or kill them. Okay, so this is I also want to explain something. Enki and his clan looks like they had always intended Washington, D.C. to be the origins and the headquarters for the new Atlantis. All the signs and symbols are there. Okay? But when Enlil landed in the United States in 1945 with the crew he brought over from the end of World War II, I believe the United States became the focal point for this battle between Enki and Enlil, and Enlil wants it to be the headquarters for the new/old world order, where we're all just dumbed down slaves, not seeking consciousness and all that. Okay, well, you can see that going on now. I mean, in a big way. Since when has the Constitution of the United States been relevant based on what this government has been doing? They ignore it completely. I mean, it's abominable. So the idea of having life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness as rights to humans, Enlil doesn't buy that. And you can see that happening right now. It's very dangerous. So, being awake, being on Enki's team, to me, made it a very dangerous place to be. Just like it was for Dr. Hayes while he was in Shuruppak in Mesopotamia, was told by Enki to get out because it's my brother's terrain and you're not welcome here. That was the truth about what happened in the Noah's flood.
We didn't see it go by.
Well, unless you were down at the South Pole with the South Pole telescope looking, because it's a very inclined angle, it's not on our ecliptic.
I thought that there was
Some people did, they had.
yeah, these strange groups would show up.
Mhm.
They would astronomy, not talk to anybody and leave
Mhm.
on the South Pole.
Mhm.
Those bases down there. That was the theory that they were looking at.
I believe it. I've seen several of the stationary shots going by. Unless you take the time to go, okay, what was that object? Here's the sun, here's up the earth, and look at the ephemeris at that exact time. You can do this with software now. You don't know what that body was, right? So, one other thing that came up.
Before you move on, can you tell me what you think about the technology that Enki
Oh,
was talking about as far as the magnetic shielding?
So if you go back to the Emerald Tablets, some people were seeking higher knowledge and opened up a portal to get access to what they call dark wars. Okay, they brought in some destructive features into Atlantis that the dweller of Atlantis said, no. In that story, he left Atlantis, Poseidon himself did, went and met with the cycle masters in the halls of Amenti. Remember we talked about Thomas, Quartus, Geopas, Boyana, Sinbetal, Orcus, and Argal, all those. Those are the ones that map your 7 chakras, right? Those are the chakra police in the Hindu religion. And they have particular names in the Hindu religion that I believe are analogous to those names. He went to them, they controlled the cycles, and he actually decided to destroy the portal for these dark lords in the story by causing a counter wobble to the earth and flooding them out. So the Lord of the Seas did that to prevent these beings from being on this planet because of what they've done. So imagine the technology that you have to have, CERN maybe, to change the magnetic field of your Earth so it responded differently to something called a wobble. Well, they have that technology. Okay. And he said in his anonymous message that I captured for you folks, was that he was going to attempt to mitigate the passage of the river to make sure that we weren't flooded again. In other words, controlling the wobble of the earth.
Wow.
But that doesn't answer it. And he talked about using weapons of mass destruction. No, he used a different term.
It was different.
Yeah, he used a different term for the weapons that they had available to them to possibly shoot any debris that was coming in and destroy it. So he's trying to protect the earth, according to him. So this is a wild one, right?
Right. Now that was on your webpage. Is it still on there?
Mhm.
We listen.
As far as I know, it is.
Yeah.
I've had my website taken down many times, my YouTube channel erased, so, it's hit and miss. I had my Windows operating system erased right before the death, my whole computer wiped out. So luckily, Christian and I are very careful about backing things up.
Wow.
So it's very possible. I hope, so really what it comes down to is, are the Enkyites or the Emeraldites going to have sway in the transition from the old world order to the new world order, which really, to me, is really the rising of the new Atlantis. Because we know from that standpoint that who was in line to be the next zodiacal lord of the earth? That's the key question. The Christians believe it's Jesus in this new era, right? In the new era, going to reign for 1,000 years, and he's got to go away for a short time and come back. Read this in the Revelations. Well, now you go read the Emerald Tablets and realize that 100 years out of every 1,000, Thoth took his avatar body into the halls of Mented to rejuvenate it. Well, there's that 1,000 years in a short duration. So we started putting very significant attention on who this next zodiacal ruler was, and it became very contentious between myself and the folks at Aquarian Radio, the lessons. And for me, I mean, he's a very knowledgeable person. We did not agree on lots of things like that. So my research clearly showed one person was Allah and he thought it was another person. So we had some differences, but I'm quite convinced the next Lord of the Earth, and his symbols are all over it, is none other than Thoth and Shida. And the reason is he was not only given that mission by Anu, but he was also accepting that mission while he stood in front of the dweller in Atlantis, in front of the cycle masters, and told them, I'm going to renege on going back to my ancient home, and going to stay here until this age of darkness is past, and I'm going to do what you asked me to do.
Okay,
He's here to help us raise our consciousness and get out of this single.
so who is he?
Nushita, Thoth, Hermes,
I mean,
Mercury.
where,
He's Enki's second-born son. Oh, where is he?
today.
Well,
What your theory? I'm gonna
where
put you
is
on
he
the
today?
spot, Yeah.
I believe
Who are these good guys?
I believe he's in Canada, actually. Did you see the Thoth X new space elevator patent that just came out this year?
No,
No kidding, go to thothx.com. He's talking about a 12-mile space launch. I'm like, your name's right on there. That's like crazy.
Thoughts?
So I think Thoth is in, I think he had an encounter with Admiral Byrd in his diary.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, so he tends to have underground facilities that are guarded by force fields so nobody can come in. Right? Now look at what, was it Boeing or Lockheed Martin that just filed a patent on an energy shield to block missiles from coming in? Did you see that?
That's Lockheed.
I think it was Boeing, actually. I thought it was Lockheed too, it was Boeing. So imagine that. So we're getting to the place where we have the technology to do what Thoth was talking about in his tablets. And he also set one up to use a picture of it before he did their tablets as well. Yeah, so the Russians have very advanced. So actually, it's interesting. In America, we used to be the land of the free and the home of the brave. And I truly think the precepts, if you go read even the creed of the Masons, it's all about raising consciousness and taking humanity to a higher place. Okay? And America used to be the headquarters of that for the whole world. Well, it's kind of switched roles from country to country. Now it looks like all the freedoms and liberties are coming to the Russians and they're being taken away from the Americans. You realize you can carry a gun and all the other things like you used to do in America. You can do that for Russia now. It's crazy. So it's like this big role reversal for all of us primitive workers to have seen communism, socialism, capitalism, and to be compare and contrast all these governing models that have been thrown our way, for us to see all the different outcomes of those models as part of our evolution of our consciousness. So I believe that's part of this, creating civilization and destroying them, that they've been doing, according to Enki, for a very long time. And this is in his anonymous message as well. So Enki's creating them, and we'll come along and destroy them. And they're actually, because we're very close to the end of this zodiacal house, and I believe right now, there's always a question about, well, you're exactly in, the zodiacal house. How do you tell? Well, that's why they have these solstice and equinox temples, to be able to look through these sight lines and see where they exactly are. So right now, I truly believe we've entered into the age of Aquarius. We're only in the first degree, a little tiny piece of it. And it looks to me like the old forces that had the Lord of the Earth command, and I believe it was Nibiru because of his symbols, the double-headed eagle. I believe because of that, he has been the one in charge under his father. And he's going to have to give up the reins. But in order to do that, I think he has some precepts that he wants done, and it has to do with very destructive things. He was a very destructive being, actually. He was a very warring being. Actually went and caused a nuclear war on the Sinai Peninsula, according to the record. So Ninurta is part of the destructive genetics from his father. So whenever you see the word Apollo, I get very concerned, even in Revelation 13. It talks about Apollyon. It's not a joke. So Zeus and Apollo, I believe they're perpetuating themselves as God and his son Jesus, when in actuality it was Enki and his son Thoth that truly not only genetically created us, upgraded us, but have our best interests in heart. So they're the light and dark duality that because we like duality, right? We don't see things out of duality, but because of our consciousness, comparing and contrasting, this one's good, this one's bad, it's all about us choosing which path we want to take. So,
I would say that half the earth will fly.
yeah, the Thoth predicts in the 12th Emerald Tablet that when we have the ability to fly around the earth in airplanes and we achieve weapons that have the power of lightning, that's when the Great War will ensue and half the humans will die. Well, isn't that happening right now? It's about to happen. So I'm very concerned for any. Listen, I spent my 7 years in the Army and made myself available to be sacrificed on behalf of my country due to nationalism and all that, which I was a young person that didn't understand. But I feel for anybody who's got kids or friends or family that are involved in the military right now, because I don't think they want any of that to exist. So part of the cleanup process with going on to a new age is probably disarming the primitive work.
But if the, girls are gonna come by and want to get killed anyway, then
Well,
maybe only half of us are gonna get killed.
well, yeah, it's possible.
That's great.
I think there will be survivors on the planet. And there were even when the Guru passed during Atrahasis' time. Even though Atrahasis and his family were saved, a lot of the Anunnaki took off and went to places they know they could survive, according to the record. This is about.
Yeah, but what kind of planet will we love? I mean, who wants to live in that kind of,
Well,
really?
exactly, I know. So this brings, it doesn't, it almost makes it fatalistic, like.
Yeah.
I
It's
don't
like,
have any
do
escape.
you want to survive and live in that kind of, really?
Well, you have to almost kind of think, what does Toph and Inky think about it? Because technically it's gonna be their time.
Mhm.
So do they wanna do they agree with wiping it all of it loose, clean and starting fresh, or picking up where you left
It's a
off,
very good question.
preserving
And I think,
and then changing, like he does a civilization.
right, I think if you choose white, then you're somewhat segregated, because that is the choice, ultimately. And for them in the past, have been, well, are you a follower of Nar sin, or are you Allah, or are you a follower of Yahweh? And they used to do coding based on who, it's like a political vote. If you worship one of those beings, you belong to them. Essentially, it's how they used to treat it.
What about children? Young children?
It's a very good question.
I mean, because how do you educate them or tell them about the light, you know what I mean? And really, any child would be scared.
All right.
And
It's
choose a
yeah,
light.
I mean, and take it even further, how do you deal with the special needs if it's not even cognizant?
Absolutely.
So, you have to have beings that are caretakers for those who don't understand, especially when they're not cognizant enough
To make
to
that
assert their
decision.
reflective consciousness and understand what's happening. So, it's all very difficult.
So Gerald, and you talk about all the physical things that might happen, will happen.
Mhm.
So is there something that we feel as far as when there's gravity, when our Earth starts, a pull and the push or whatever? Is there something that we're gonna feel here on Earth?
Well,
We're
very
gonna feel
possible.
like we're weighted down
It's
or?
very possible. And you may feel lighter or you may feel heavier depending on which pole of magnet is affecting you at the time.
Yeah.
Now, some people believe that this causes an entire pole shift, magnetic pole shift on the Earth. Well, we see the magnetic North Pole moving around pretty significantly right now. In fact, more so than it has in the last 50 years. So it's like,
So the reason I ask that is because it just seems like in our area, people have just been saying, you just feel so tired, feel like you're just being like you're just being pulled down.
Now, Krista and I are very sensitive to gravity because of the structural work that we do. And we have been noticing that there's something different. We have to really be a lot more attentive to how we're sitting, how we're standing, if you're going to play that game. Okay. Because gravity is a orthogonal field to the Earth. Right? It goes straight up down. So if you can line yourself in it, you're going to feel something differently than if you're allowing your pole to fall over.
Right.
Because you're designed as a being to stand up vertically in that field and experience the effects of gravity, if you look at my equation 5a, in your antenna. Okay, so gravity is very important, and you don't get taught this stuff as a kid. I wasn't, because this is not the handbook of life I got. Okay, but energetically, it's very important. So I think there are, especially people that are doing yoga, that are very sensitive to gravity, or feeling that, and we are. In the movie Melancholia, it discusses the atmospheric level of oxygen being changed significantly. Yeah. So all of a sudden, people were having trouble breathing because there wasn't enough oxygen.
We've noticed that in our town. Everybody has had bad respiratory problems. And
Oh, really?
yeah. And
Well, listen, in your part of the neck of the woods, you've got all this onshore flow from the
Fukushima.
outbreak from Fukushima
Yeah.
that nobody's talking about.
it's really bad. And I've noticed I've never had allergies before, ever.
Mhm.
And in the last 2 to 3 years, it's just been awful. I mean, it's just like a blockage.
And they spring over us all the time.
Yeah. What about the chemical? Well, listen, it could be as bad as maybe using some heavy metal in place of gold, which is what Enki says in this anonymous message. He said the kings of this earth would not relinquish their gold to protect your atmosphere. Instead, they used, a substitute for it that was not good for humans. And he comes out in further states, scientifically, that radiation from the sun doesn't cause cancer. But you mix it with this, and it's going to cause terrible tumors and all these things for people. Look at the rate of cancer.
I know, it's really bad.
It's unbelievable.
And I will tell you that what they're spraying in the Pacific Northwest, you must be serious, because when the jet flies over, you see the chemtrail, and it starts out with this, and it spans out, it doesn't move. And we're on the Pacific Northwest, we have that constant ocean air. Our weather is constant, it stays there. And I'm thinking, damn, that stuff must be really powerful.
Well, it could be, and even worse, imagine that with our nanotechnology that we have now. And by the way, we had a nano wafer growing facility right next to the building where I worked at UCSD. I toured it several times. This is real stuff. They could build a nanobot to go into your body and do anything that they wanted, and it's almost undetectable. For good or ill. Okay. So imagine you were to put some of those nanos in the spray that potentially affected human DNA, so you could dumb them down like you wanted to. Well, Enki's insinuating in his anonymous message that his son Marduk has done that in the United States. And I recently saw a report that approximately 73% in the United States have been exposed to these nanos. That's really conspiratorial and all of it, but it's quite frightening.
Actually, Michael Crichton wrote a book about that.
Oh, did he?
Exactly.
Which one?
Hey, Gerald.
It's
About like Hawkins Old.
So anyways, I think it's one of the last books he wrote.
Quest.
Exactly what he just said.
Because of the work that David Hudson did, he, in my opinion, proved that a certain amount, I forgot how many milligrams it was, but consistently caused the actual Kundalini to happen. And that the reports of his patients actually experience very similar things in terms of consciousness and energy. Is that where we're trying to go to ascend? Is that, I mean, that seems, according to Dave Hudson, that accelerated the path instead of the 20 years of meditating.
Right. Well, actually, it's funny you bring that up. If you were to just live in India, and I wish we had some here. We have some neighbors in this. It's fun to talk about that. If you were really hardcore into yoga, it would probably, and you just started, it would probably take you 20 years to get to the place where your energy is actually activating your intellect. It takes a lot of work to integrate your body with all with the energy fields around you. That means getting it so elastic that it can be aligned in that field so you can experience it like that. And that's true from a glandular and spinal level. So it takes a lot of work. When we discovered structural integration, we realized that in a 5-week period, you could trigger that process and probably be there a quarter to a fifth of the time. Okay? If you really worked at it and believed and played the gravity game by keeping your bowling ball on top of your on top of your body, right? So, now as far as energetically speaking and amplifying human energy, we know that any conductor like gold can facilitate a electrical transfer through a fluid medium. A fluid medium can conduct electricity, but if you add something in it that's a superconductor, like monatomic, orbitally rearranged monoatomic element, it's a superconductor, meaning it's a lossless energy system. If you were to build a wire out of this stuff, you could put electricity on one side, come out the other side. There's no heat and no loss of energy. Now think about that with our telephone lines. We lose so much, our power lines, we lose half the energy just radiating out because it's not efficient. Well, now imagine you take a superconductor like that and put it in the human body. That's what was going on in Hathor's temple as they were consuming these conical bread cakes, later called mono. They were creating this out of gold, smelting it. Okay? And when you smelt gold melted, it turns into a liquid, not a powder, what was described in Exodus 32:20, right? Moses sprinkled this powder on the water and fed it to the Israelites. Well, he just melted a golden calf. We didn't talk about the important substance they added to it, which was stibium or antimony. When added to gold during the smelting process, produces a white powder. And this white powder was the basis that David Hudson wrote about in his patent. That is a orbitally rearranged monoatomic element that has superconductive properties. And all the transition metals, it turns out, have that as well. Okay, there's 6 of them in the platinum group, and silver, and gold, and a whole bunch of rhodium, and what are the other ones? I mean,
Iridium. Iridium.
yeah. So there's several. Okay. But some are more accessible than others, and some of them are extremely expensive, even more like gold. Okay, so what happens when you create a superconductor in the human body? Well, if you're having energy interactions with gravity and the electromagnetic field and photons, and all of a sudden it gets quite amplified, and it can accelerate your evolution of energy as it transcends from your chakras up to the very top one as well. So that's why I believe that's why the Anunnaki are using it. But it turns out it has also the effect of tempering the destructive reproductive process that goes on in your telomere. There's sometimes cell divides. It's this little end cap at the end of your your DNA. If it doesn't decay, you don't age. So it has anti-aging properties. So there's all these longevity people that are taking it for that reason. We probably don't have enough data right now to say how much it could affect your lifespan, but I've met several people in their 80s that have been taking it for 11 years or more, talking about their hair turning back on, having the stamina and the fitness of somebody when they're 40. So they've done something to interrupt their accelerated aging process. So for that reason, we looked into it, and we found an alchemist. After making it ourselves and trying to be able to ship it while we're on the go in Mexico, we finally settled down with someone to take our formula and produce it for us. But it's pretty profound stuff. And if you're sensitive to...
So have you been taking it?
Yes, we
And have you noticed any difference?
It's amazing. And I don't want to be an Alex Jones at every commercial break and push the product, okay? But we put it out there, it's for sale on our website, we have it on
What
Amazon.
what difference do you notice?
Clarity and thought, purity of consciousness, a lot more sensitivity to light and energy fields, and your meditation is profound. A lot more active dreams. Dreaming, if you get closer to the borderland dream state, you might be able to start experiencing your energy